Hello and welcome to our Insight Sessions webinar series. In our first Insight session, we focused on building and pricing your MSP program with David Weeks. And now today's session is focused on the elements that you need to build a marketing program so that you can go out, generate leads, and then sales. Leading our session today is Belair, who is the Vice President of Marketing and Business Development here at SolarWinds Enable. Welcome, Derek.
All right, thanks, Tracy. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for taking the time out of your incredibly busy days to attend this webinar. As Tracy pointed out, my name is Belair. I'm Vice President of Marketing and Business Development here at Enable. And I've been with the company since day one. So I started back in April 2000. And everything I'm going to talk to you today both applies to the type of work that I did when we were a few employees, all the way to core principles that I still use to this day. I've been at Enable definitely the longest. I've worked with Gavin, I've worked with Mike Cullen, for those of you that know them. And the thing that I find that's been interesting is that those core principles that we used early on in our sort of journey at Enable are still incredibly true today. So I find a lot of times you listen in on marketing webinar or sales webinar, and they're either way too sort of focused on the small business or way too focused on big business. So I'll say that the points that I'm bringing home today are as relevant, they were day one and they are today. Now, I understand that most of you have sat in on some presentation with David Weeks. David, for those of you that have had the chance to meet him, is a great resource. He is definitely the guy that builds a lot of programs, understands pricing, understands managed services, and he's a great resources from that perspective. He talks to, I'd say, every partner that we've brought on board, and he deals with all of our big successful partners. This presentation I'm going to do today really follows on the heels of that. So what I want to talk about is how do you go to market, how do you generate leads, how do you close business? So how is marketing the engine that drives that? I always say, now take it with a grain of salt, I am the VP of Marketing, but I always say marketing is the most important thing you can do. And it is a very broad topic. Now, I'm not going to cover pricing models. I'm not going to cover product management. I'm not going to cover PR. I'm really going to focus on tactical things that you can do in the business to get a good, strong marketing program off the ground. I will say that my biggest focus is about implementing a program that you will maintain throughout the year. I talk to a lot of partners, and I find that with marketing, it's almost a bit of a feast and famine. They start off strong, they implement a big program, they spend lots of money, it goes on for a few months, and then it kind of tapers off. Now, they either lost the resources that was doing it, they don't see the return, and then it's very cyclical. The one thing that I've learned by doing this is that you really got to stick to it. So it's better to implement a program that is manageable from both a financial perspective, from a human resource perspective, implement it and really follow through. The other thing you're going to hear from me a lot, and this is potentially different than other people that run marketing, is that I am all about metrics. So from my perspective, it is all about leads to sales metrics. We run a very, very metrics-oriented marketing department, and we do that, I'll say I do that really as a bit of a sense of preservation. Marketing, when you do marketing and you don't see the results, right away people start to wonder, why are you spending so much money on marketing? Why do you need more? What's it going to give? And if you don't have strong answers for that, it makes it very difficult as yourself as a business owner or for whoever you work for to really understand what you're going to get. So early on in my career, I was really focused on being able to provide key metrics for how a marketing program, a marketing spend, a marketing headcount, what that was going to mean to the bottom line. And the metrics that we've developed at Enable may not necessarily apply to you directly, but the methodology and the model that we've built is very relevant. And I've talked to lots of VPs of marketing in all sorts of companies, at SolarWinds and others, and what I've found is top producing organization with great sales models have very predictable lead generation businesses in that they know exactly how many leads, what type of leads they need to get to close business every month. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So the agenda, real simple. We're going to talk about defining the marketing programs, defining the strategy. We're going to talk about how to put a plan in place. And by that I mean a plan that is realistic, that is fundable, that is doable. And we're going to talk about how to execute on key strategies and tactics that are going to yield the highest results. I promise you, I'm not going to talk about hundreds of thousands of dollars of marketing programs and huge initiatives. I'm going to talk about things that you can do starting tomorrow that are going to generate leads. So the first thing I always tell people, and this, everybody nods their head when I say this, is you got to know your audience and you got to know their trigger points. All of you on the phone obviously have businesses, you've got good businesses, you've got clients. But what I find is when I start digging with entrepreneurs and I talk about, do you know your customers? Do you know your prospects? They all say yes. But what they don't necessarily know is what makes them unique, or how do you identify a group of those customers as a segment? So, when we started at Enable, we really started taking a look after about 6 months of selling, we started taking a look at the types of people we were recruiting, the types of customers we were bringing on board. And what we found is there was a pretty big strike zone. So we had, a couple of mid-market, we had some state and local government, we had a couple of nonprofits, we had a bunch of service providers, we had a couple of local IT guys. But there really wasn't a lot of rhyme or reason. We were desperate to close business, we wanted to get people on board, and we really didn't discriminate as to who we brought on board. When we took a step back and we started taking a look at, who were the types of customers that we wanted, who were our successful customers, and who were the customers that we brought on, but they never were able to implement what we did. And what we started finding out is service providers really was an area where we could focus on. They had an identifiable pain. They had trigger points that we could actually address. It was an audience that we could actually talk to in a meaningful way. So when I say know your audience, I'm really talking about of your 1 or 2 or 300 customers that you've got, what makes them a group? Are there subsegments, verticals? Are there, anything specific, either trigger points, technology that they use, pains? What makes them unique? And can you draw a circle around those customers? The other thing I always talk about is, are you looking, when you're talking about your target audience, are you looking at net new customers, meaning net new to the managed services business, or are you looking at potentially displacing an incumbent? Displacing an incumbent can be a great strategy. For one is, easily identifying a group of customers because, they are your competitors' customers, so you can identify them. If you've got a very strong value proposition, competitive value proposition, you can really focus on that. The pain points in a lot of cases will either be pricing or value. Now, I always tell people, to displace an incumbent using price is a very slippery slope, because if they come over on a pricing basis, you're always going to struggle to drive a lot of profitability from that customer. So, my goal is always, if you can displace an incumbent based on value, you will do much better in the long run. Are you looking at growing your customer base? Do you have a phenomenal model for bringing customers on boards that have never been exposed to managed services and really pitching the value there? So that's certainly one thing that you want to take a look at. The other one is, existing customers, versus a lead that's in your database for many years. So, the old adage that it is, much easier, much more profitable to sell more products to existing customers than it is to win new customers is very true. But the key is to really understand both sides. You've got customers, you've got prospects, you've got a database. What's in there? Are there any type of correlation between them? Whether it's vertical, a technology focus. We have a great group of service providers that focus pretty much exclusively on the dental industry. And they have made a phenomenal business by really honing their skills on a very specific segment. Now, they didn't come to that epiphany by doing market research and reading a bunch of stuff. What they did is they looked within their customer base and they all of a sudden realized that they had a disproportionate large number of dental practices as customer. And what they found is that they had a unique value proposition to that group. They had technology certification, they had implementation skills, and maybe more importantly is they had reference customers. And that's a very important one, is when you know your audience, you can start pulling customers out that will act as reference to that segment. Marketing to a very specific vertical is a very cost-effective and usually a very high return on investment. So know your audience, know their trigger point. Number 2 is know how and where to reach your audience. And if you don't know, do a survey. I love surveys. I'm sure as you guys as customer have gotten our surveys over time. SurveyMonkey is your friend, and it is an easy way to reach out to your customer base and ask them about their business. Do you belong to any association? Do you focus on any vertical specific? Do you have technology certification or expertise that is unique in the marketplace? The more of that information you gather, the more you can hone your marketing programs. Now, doing a survey does 2 things. One is it gives you valuable information, and number 2 is it tells you who are the customers that want to engage with you because they're filling out a survey. So not only does it give you valuable information that you can use to shape programs, it tells you who in your database is willing to be a potential reference for you, that is willing to share information with you. Everyone that responds to a survey, I would urge you to go back to them and try to ask for a case study, a video testimonial, a quote, anything that you can use to promote those guys on your site and promote them against other customers. So know how and where to reach your audience. If you are selling to dental integrators, for example, you're selling to medical practices, know where these guys hang out. And I'm not talking about just physical, know where they're going online. Do they subscribe to a social media site? Do they read a certain blog? Do they receive, magazines, at their office that is specific to them? If the survey doesn't work, the best thing you can do is go to your customer's office, sit in their waiting room, and look at the magazines that they have piled up. Because those magazines are targeting your customer, and that is a great source of potential lead generation activities. So if you see that there is the Legal Review of Ohio magazine is sitting on that pile, chances are, that publication is targeting your audience. You read through it, you find out if they're doing any seminars, any webinars, are they doing anything locally that you could basically tag along to really penetrate that space. So social media, public groups are a phenomenal way to reach your target audience because they are all there. The other one that I really like is your competitors' forums. So you have competitors that may be selling into a vertical you want to get into. Look at them up online. What are their forums? What are their blogs? Who's reading it? Is there any information that you can gather by looking at what your competitors are doing? Again, the easiest thing that you can do if you want to penetrate something is find out who is a market leader in that space and do those activities in a much smarter way. The other thing is industry associations. I will say that you pick any type of vertical, any type of company, doesn't matter what it is, there is an association that targets them, I guarantee it. Again, dental integrators, they have regional chapters, medical, doctor, CAD, retail, it doesn't matter what it is, there is an association that targets your customer that you can get along with. And again, with these associations, the key is not, I'm going to spend $10,000 to become the gold sponsor and I'm going to do all of these activities. You can do things cost effectively. The association has a news group. Join the association. Enter the news groups online. Look at them up on social media. See who else is a sponsor, who else is a customer that's joined, what are the things that you can do, and be proactive. All of these associations are dying for money. Now, they will pitch you the silver, gold, platinum programs, and they will be incredibly expensive, but be specific with what you want. I want to host a lunch and learn at my office. I want to, attend the breakfast series. I want to do a webinar to your base, and here's how much money I have. Those types of things will always, without fail, generate a ton of activities. The one thing I will say is if you're going to do anything with industry association, be sure to have reference customers from that association. If you do not have it, it will be incredibly difficult to penetrate the association, but also to get members to come on board. And again, local associations. Again, there's local chambers of commerces, there's local, IT groups. There are associations for everything. I love association because it is very much of a lemming mentality. Once one person moves, they all tend to move. They move as a group, hence why they join the association in the first place. So number 3 is know the competitors. So this is one of the funniest because everybody I talk to that's an MSP says, yes, I know my competitors because I either won a deal or I lost a deal from them. I know who they are. And the key is not necessarily to know them from the deals you've won or deals you close, but it's to understand their value proposition. Understand how are they marketing themselves? How are they positioning themselves? Is it unique? Is it complementary? Is there any way that you can identify how they are pushing their message out to the audience? What verticals are they going after? The beautiful thing with websites is, and their social media group, is they will tell you everything. We are going to be at this event on this day. Hey, here's a press release saying we've just joined this association. Here's where you can see us on the latest webinar. It's important to understand both the strategies, but almost more important to understand the tactics. How are they getting their message out? I find a lot of times, and we at Enable do this all the time, is we do this big competitive analysis. We look at all of our competitors. We do comparison. There's a column. They've got some check marks. We've got more. There's our competitive analysis. And that's great. The reality, though, is your competitors are evolving their business just as much as you are. And to do a competitive analysis once a year is not enough. You've got to be looking at the competition at least on a quarterly basis. And you've got to be looking at the types of things they are doing to get their message out. And I'm talking about, what is unique about what they do. Are they penetrating a new vertical? Did they just recently, gain a bunch of certification as Cisco CCSCs or anything like that? Are there anything that they are doing that is unique in the marketplace that you need to be aware of? Find out how you're winning against them. I'm sure that you guys have won on head-to-head deals against your competitors. What makes it unique? Is it price? Is it service? Is it coverage? What makes it unique? And make sure you document that. Because the important thing is what is a competitive advantage today may not be a competitive advantage down the road. Because I guarantee you that as many high fives as the sales team is doing for having won a big competitive rip-out or a big head-to-head competitive deal, those guys are studying why they lost the deal and what they need to do differently. So every time you win a deal, just assume that they are going to fix whatever was that made you win it and that you're going to have to increase or enhance those competitive advantages. Understand why you're losing business. Again, I find that you learn almost more with the deals you lose than the deals you win. When you lose a deal, make sure that you document what happened when you lost the deal. Was it, again, pricing, feature, value, coverage, expertise, certification, whatever, and make sure that you document why you lose them. At other points, it's important to understand if you are constantly losing on head-to-head deals, is there something you can do to change that tide, or do you need to go down a different route? At Enable, we go head-to-head, all the time with other competitors. We sit down every week as a management team, and we look at every deal we've won, every deal we've lost, and what are the takeaways. And it's all about implementing things the following week. Not in a month, not in a year. It's about implementing things to make those changes happen. Now, changes, they'll come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some will be short-term, some will be long-term. But I find that implementing short-term changes to affect winning or losing deals has a significant impact on both morale and productivity of the sales team because they see that the company is evolving to be more competitive, but it also adds to the wear and tear on the competitors. Because if they want a deal this month from you, they're going to try the same tactic next month. And if you've pivoted and you've changed the way you do it, that's going to keep them guessing as to what it is that you're doing. So I can't stress enough, examine every deal you win and lose and what are the takeaways from it. The other thing is what's unique about what you do. So David Week talked about building your programs, pricing your programs, how to go to market, and that's great. The problem is managed services is a term that's used by lots of people. It tends to become generic when too many people use it without defining it. And then you end up on a head-to-head with some sort of a managed service program from someone that is leveraging a very similar program, very similar pricing. So when I say what's unique, it's what is above and beyond managed services. What is unique to what you do? Why are people doing business with you? Why are you winning business? Make sure that those key points are front and center on your site, on your social media. You just flog why you guys are unique, what makes you guys the best in the space, and why are people coming? And again, it's not enough for you to say it. You need to get customers to say it for you. You need to get advocates, so customers that are not brand new. That's a mistake we find a lot. And to be honest, we've done that at Enable where we've won a huge deal from a competitor. We put that guy up on the pedestal. We say, here's a quote, here's a case study. The customer's really happy. And then the honeymoon phase potentially ends with the customer, and then he's less willing to be a reference. So I will say that if you're going to use references, make sure that those customers have been with you for 6 months minimum, that the rocky road of the first few months is the honeymoon phase is over and everybody is working together, and make sure that you have enough references to be able to compete. And the other thing I'll say is, if you're going to address a competitive program, if you're going to target competitors, make sure you have at the very least 3 solid references. 1's not enough, 2's not enough, you need 3. And you need to basically have these guys showcased as to why they did business with you. Why did we leave the competition? Now, you may not want to name the competition directly, but they can say, we left because, poor quality of service, terrible support, whatever those key differentiators are that you want to hang your hat on, make sure that those are front and center. So that's number 3. Number 4, fine-tune the message. Messaging is one of those things where it is just this sort of labor of love. You start with it and it never ends. The problem that I find with messaging is that messaging is always sort of a second thought. We're redoing the website, so we should look at the messaging. Everybody collaborates on message. Everybody is chipping in, and then what you end up with is this Frankenstein message that just, when you read it, you can tell that it was written by 5 different people that all voted on keywords. The one thing I will say is, although collaboration is fantastic, I am a huge believer that message comes out of one person. So one person needs to own messaging. It needs to be the voice of your company, and everything that you do needs to have that voice. So messaging is incredibly important. You'll start working on messaging and you're never going to stop. It is one of those things where you learn and evolve and learn and evolve. Every time you lose a deal, update. Every time you win a deal, update the messaging. Make sure that it reflects those key points. As you add products, as you add, services, the messaging has got to evolve. What worked 5 years ago is not going to work now, and it needs to be constantly evolving. At Enable, when we started, our messaging was very simple. We did remote monitoring and management, and we did it for pretty much MSPs in North America. And that was it. But then you start adding product. You start adding things like MSP Manager. You get acquired. The family of products evolve. Your geography evolves. Managed services as a term is used in North America, but not in the international marketplace. So all of a sudden, messaging is pulled in a lot of directions. So having one person be that champion is critical. Define your unique value proposition. Everybody sells managed services. Everybody has similar products, managed security, patch, backup. Those things are great. Those are not what makes you unique. What makes you unique is the fact that you are all about service, or you are, a value solution in the marketplace, or you have the best coverage. Whatever that is unique needs to come out in the messaging. The biggest thing that I find people do is they adopt this generic, watered down message because everybody uses it. So they'll sprinkle in a bit of cloud and a bit of mobility and managed services and backup and and so on and so forth. And the problem is everybody's using that. So unique messaging without being generic. And I'll tell you, it is tough. It is hard. The more you work on messaging, it becomes generic. You lose those key points. So whenever I do a messaging exercise, I always say, circle those 3 or 4 keywords that you cannot lose in the process. Service, value, support, whatever those key words are, make sure you circle them, and they need to stay there. You cannot lose those, because whenever you do, you'll just lose what is unique about what you do. The other thing, and everybody that works on messaging is guilty of doing this, is be careful of not being overly complicated. As technology people, we love acronyms, MSP, RMM, SMB. We circle ourselves with terms that nobody else understands. We use things like cloud. We use things like, mobility. All these types of words, which are great to us, mean nothing to anybody else. So one of the things that I always do is whenever we're doing a messaging exercise and we've got that, that 2-3 sentences that really describe the core of a program, the product, your business, I always vet it by other people. Talk to your husbands, your wives, your friends, cousins, uncle. Talk to anybody and just see what their reaction is. Now, I always get the same feedback. Well, we're not, my uncle, husband, wife, cousin, they're not my target audience. And that is potentially true. But the reality is, if they don't understand, chances are that your prospect, your customers, aren't going to take the time to read the paragraphs and paragraphs you've written full of complexity. It's got to be simple. It's got to be ultra simple. You look at great marketing organizations, like huge powerhouse marketing organizations, Coke and Nike and Pepsi, they have made an art of keeping their messaging simple. And I guarantee you, when you start adding multiple product lines and huge product families and lots of complexity and lots of geos, it is simple to let the messaging get away from you and just keep adding and keep talking and keep saying things. And that is a mistake. By keeping it generic, you're capturing your customers or your prospects' attention, which is very limited. So if you think that your attention span is low, and I know mine is, your customers are even lower. Your prospects, even lower. Because they're looking at 10 sites, over lunch, grabbing a sandwich, having a pop. They got 2 or 3 screens going. They'll look at a couple of sentences. If they can't figure it out, they're moving on. I do it all the time. So whenever I work on messaging, I always think about that is, if I was to show someone a screen, of a design of a homepage, a design of a fly sheet, I give them 10 seconds and I flip it away. It's like, what did you learn from that? Did it stick? Did anything resonate? And if they say, what, I wasn't able to see enough, I really don't get it, you got to go back to the drawing board. The hardest part of what you'll do is pare down the messaging to core elements. It is ultra easy to write 20 pages on something. It is hard to write a paragraph on something that is the same content. So just be really careful to not overcomplicate or overdraw out your content. And the other thing is, ask yourself, what you're saying, is it simple to understand? Is it valuable for the customer? Is it going to help their business? Is it going to make you money? Is it truly good for those customers? When you think of messaging, that's what they want. They are looking at you and they're saying, can these people help me? Do I feel comfortable that they can deliver? Do they know my business? Do they understand what I do? And if your messaging doesn't say that, you're in the tough position that you've got to redo it. So those first 4 points were really more the high level. The next 3 are really more tactical. So when you're doing lead generation, you really want to start off with strong messaging, target audience, unique value proposition, great, simple value prop. So that's what we talked about. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about metrics. So, one of the key things that we started real early at Enable is being a complete metrics-oriented marketing team. Now, the problem with marketing is that typically it doesn't lend itself very well to metrics. You do design, websites, you do a fly sheet, you do a lunch and learn, you do PR, you do advertising. All those things, I find marketers love to dodge metrics. Now, Tracy will attest to this. Like, I am a bit of a metric Nazi. I absolutely love metrics and defining the exact process so that I know at the beginning of the month where we're going to be at the end of the month with sales. So as you look for new customers, are you pulling prospects from the database? Are you looking to convert customers? Or are you looking to upsell and cross-sell? it is very important to understand when I talk about, the type of audience, it is really important that you bucket those into three categories. So the way I always look at it is net new. I want to address net new audience. I want to find net new clients that I've never spoken to before, didn't have them in their database, net new people, engage them. That is one set of metrics that I'll talk about. The next one is pulling leads out of the database. It is much easier to pull a lead out of the database than it is to acquire a brand new name. So are you trying to pull net new people to engage with you? Are you trying to pull names in the database? Or are you trying to upsell and cross-sell? So if pulling names out of the database is easier than net new, upselling and cross-selling customers is the easiest because they are engaged with you. So number one is define the types of leads, the type of activity that you want. The other one is understand the sales process from a metrics perspective. What I mean by that is how many people interested in your product or your services do you need to get to a sales guy so that he can book appointments? And how many appointments do you need to book for appointments to go off? And how many appointments that go off do you need to be able to close a deal? Understanding that is the fundamental thing in marketing. Like it is the number one thing that you can do is understand those metrics. So for example, us at Enable, the way we look at it is how many leads do I need to generate to be able to get what we call an initial presentation. So you guys have all been through an initial presentation. This is where somebody says, I'd like to book you in on a call with one of our AEs, and then they'll walk you through. So what I look at is how many leads do I need to get to inside sales so that they can book an IP? How many IPs do we need to book so that an IP will actually go off? The person actually attend and doesn't bail out. And how many IPs need to go off before we get a deal? Understanding those steps are absolutely critical to what you're going to need to do at the beginning of the sales process or the marketing process to be able to get the desired deals at the end. Now, many of you will know this information anecdotally, and many of you will say, well, it really depends on the type of lead. It really depends on where this lead came from. And that is an absolute fact. The way that we look at it is early on at Enable, we spent a lot of time defining what a lead is. Now, everybody's got their interpretation of it. The most important thing is an alignment between marketing and sales on what a lead is. Now, you'll define that today, and in 6 months, it will change. And it will change because if you've got one salesperson, well, he's got a certain amount of capacity. So a lead to a single person sales team is going to be somebody that's interested in buying because he can only handle so many of those. A lead in a sales team where you've got 5 people and some of them are cold calling and some of them are closing business may be a little cooler in the process. So you don't want to just give, I'm interested in buying. You may also give, I'm interested in buying, but I also attended a webinar and I came to see you at an industry event and I gave you my card. A lead in a sales team of 100 is going to be anybody that shows interest in our product by either learning about the business, learning about our products, learning about our services. We'll consider that a lead. So for us at Enable, we have 3 types of lead. We have what we call pricing request. So that is somebody that goes to the site and says, I'm interested in learning about your pricing, or sends an email to sales at and says, guys, can you just provide me pricing? For us, that is a high quality lead because they are interested in finding out about pricing. It means really 2 things. One is, I'm about to buy your competitor's product and I want to make sure that I've seen everybody else's product so that I'm not getting hosed over here, which is great because we want to talk to them. Or I'm tire kicking, my boss told me I should look at this, and I'm just really sort of feeling it out. So for us, and that may not be true for you, but for us, a pricing request is probably the hottest lead. Then we have what we call trial requests. So for us, it's anybody that says, I'm interested in seeing the product, seeing the service. I'm interested in a bit of a proof of concept. I want to learn about what you do. That is another type of lead. Then the last type of lead is, I've attended a webinar. I sat in on a video. I went to your site and I wanted to download your infographic. That is somebody that is expressing interest in learning about you, your business, your services. When we close business, without fail, a customer or a prospect that turns into a customer will usually do 3 learn activities. So they will attempt to learn about your business 3 different ways. So they don't know anything about Enable. They'll want to know, who is Enable? Yeah, I'm interested in the space. I'll download a white paper. Yeah, that's interesting. I want to learn a bit more. I'll sit in on a video. Yeah, I'm interested. I'll sit in on a webinar. Then they will do a trial activity, which is, in our case, they want to see the product. In your case, it may very well be, I want to see your capabilities. I want to see what kind of services. I want to engage and find out how this is going to help me technologically, but also from a business perspective. And then the last one is a buy, which is, I'm giving you a buying signal. I am interested to find out about price. Those activities I find are unique regardless of the type of industry that you're in. Taking a step back, it really tells me that I need to have at least 3 type of asset that I can give them to learn about our business. So I need to make it easy for them to learn about our business. Everything that we do, we capture via a form. So it is incredibly important that you know who is accessing your information, who in your database is engaging with you, who is cooling down, so that you can market to them in a very specific way. So for us, as you guys know, everything you do on our site, we capture your information. When I invest in marketing resources, I will invest 3 times more on learn activities. I'll invest twice as many on try and once on buy. If they're at the buy level, I want to engage with them. I don't want to make it complicated. Pick up the phone. We'd love to talk to you. Here's the pricing guide. Here's what we can do. So again, 3 learns, 1 try, 1 buy is typically what you'll see. The other thing is, make sure that you define what a lead is and what is going to happen to a lead, and make sure that there is complete alignment with sales. Now, the old in marketing, everybody always says, oh, the leads are garbage, but I need more of them. And that is, everybody will say that, these leads are no good. I just need more to close business. So it is important that you define on an ongoing basis. So for example, myself and Tracy, every week without fail, sit with the sales management at Enable, both the guys that, Mike Cullen and Frank Coletti, which you guys probably know as the VPs, but also the manager of the groups, and we go through the leads report, how many leads we generated, what were the lead types, and we ask for feedback. Which leads were good, which leads were bad, what can we do differently? It is a painful process as a marketer to do that because you're inherently protective of your leads. You've worked hard to generate them, and nobody wants to be told that the leads were no good. But the reality is the alignment between sales and marketing on what a lead is, what is a quality lead, goes a long way. The other thing is, how many leads does it take to close an appointment? How many appointments does it take to close a deal? You need to understand those so that you can start assigning value. So for us at Enable, the big thing is always, how much money am I willing to spend on a lead? And that is the fundamental question that you get asked as a marketer all the time, which is, why do you need $10,000 to do this activity? What's it going to do? And so at Enable, we spend anywhere between $35 to $50 on a lead. We have our metrics down for how many leads it takes to become an IP, an initial presentation, and I know exactly how many IPs it takes to close a deal. We know when by myself as the VP of Marketing and Mike and Frank as VPs of Sales, I know that by the second week of the month, if we haven't hit our initial presentation number, we are going to struggle at the end of the month. Because the reality is, we know that it takes X amount of leads that turn into X amount of initial presentation and X amount of deals. Those metrics I don't have for your business because it'll be unique for each one of you. Your sales process, your budget, the types of leads, all of those things will impact it. But it is critical that you sit down, even if you only have one salesperson, but that you sit down and you define what is a lead and what are the steps required to basically get a lead to close into a deal. Those percentages are going to be critical. Once you've got that, you can assign a value to each lead. And now when you are looking at marketing programs, it is an incredibly easy conversation because it's easy at Enable. What I say to every vendor that is pitching me an industry sponsorship, a trade show sponsorship, advertising on their site, guest blogging, you name it, I always say I have a hard cap of between $35 to $50 a lead. A lead, in my eyes, are a service provider that is located in these countries, that has 5 employees, that generate X amount of dollars per year, and that is looking to acquire a solution. That is a lead, and I'm willing to pay $35 to $50 for that lead. So, Mr. Trade Show, Mr. Association, what can you do for me within those parameters? And the conversation all of a sudden becomes incredibly easy. So if you're looking at hiring a social media company, you're looking at hiring a Google AdWords expert, The conversation to me is always, you need to generate leads between $35 and $50 that fit this criteria. If you can't do that, we can't do business with you. And it has to be incredibly easy. Being able to understand those metrics is important to you, it's important to the business, but it makes your life so much easier when you're building out marketing programs, when you're building out advertising programs, when you're figuring out how to go to market, because all of a sudden you now know that if $50,000 or $10,000 goes into the bucket, you know how many leads will come out of that, and you'll be able to predict how much business will come from that. Now, it does get difficult when you start looking at doing an activity now, and over the next 3 months, you're going to generate leads, and then over the next 6 months, you're going to close business. But that is why you need to, as part of your CRM, use the marketing functionality, which is all about grouping leads into campaigns. Whenever we spend any money, it doesn't matter with who, we generate leads, and those leads could be business cards, they could be somebody registered online for a white paper. We put those names into a campaign. At the end, we look at the business that we close and we look at the campaigns that were associated with it. And if all of a sudden we've generated tons of leads from this trade show, but 6 months later we haven't closed a single deal, it is very easy for me to make a call on whether or not that campaign produced anything. So that's knowing the metrics. I can't stress enough, it is critical to be able to get a good grasp on that. The other thing is defining the call to action. A lot of time I talk to MSPs and they put a program together. They've just joined Enable, they've just, got some certification from Microsoft or Cisco, or they've just built out the data center and they want to basically go out there. So they put out a press release, they do a bit of advertising locally, they do an email blast, but they don't have a good, strong grasp of what the calls to action are. So I always say everything you do has got to have 2 calls to action, a primary and a secondary. The primary one is obvious. It's what you want these guys to do. If you attend a webinar on marketing, I want to send you a link to download an infographic on MSP marketing. I'm going to send you a link to download a white paper or an ebook on marketing for MSPs. The second call to action is going to be, thanks for sitting on this webinar. Here are other webinars, may not be marketing, but here are other webinars that you may find interesting. The key is, if you're going to do an activity, you need to have strong calls to action. And again, these calls to action have to be gated in that you need to understand who is doing them, and you need to understand how many people are doing these activities as a result of the webinar, the campaign that you did. So for us, we basically we'll send out an email on, would you like to attend a webinar? My metrics are going to be how many emails did I send, what was the open rate, so how many people opened the email and read it, what was the click-through, so people that actually clicked to register, and then how many people actually registered for the activity. So that is all the initial campaign metrics that I will look at. Then, after, I'll find out, okay, well, we basically had, we sent out 1,000 emails, we had 400 people open the email, 200 people clicked on the link, 50 people registered, and 20 people attended. Those are great metrics for me to find out. Then I will take those 50, I will email them a thank you for registering, here's a link for something else. I will take everybody that registered but didn't attend, and I will say, sorry you couldn't make it, here's a link to the video, which we're recording now, and basically here's also a white paper that you may find interesting, and I'll email everybody else saying, sorry the time wasn't convenient for you, here's the recording in case you missed it. The key is all about leveraging the activities that you do. Sending out one email is great, but again, it's all about the follow-up and trying to pull these guys through. I always say to people, start small. A complicated campaign that has advertising and PR and a webinar and activity, like these things get difficult because all of a sudden now you're running a full marketing department with all of these emails. So start small. You want to host a webinar on managed security. Great. Take 1,000 names. See the metrics. Send out the email. How many people registered? What happened? And look for discrepancies in these metrics. Again, the big thing for us is it's great to capture the metrics, but the important part is to compare the metrics over time. So if every month you're doing a webinar, look at the metrics and see if when you change the title of the email, when you change the body of the email, is the open rate higher? So for us, what we discovered is if you write the title of an email into a question, you get a much higher rate than just putting in a simple sentence. Attend a webinar on managed backup, not as interesting as is, backup a concern to you? Have you suffered a failure in the last 2 years? Play with the titles and see what the open rates are. Play with the body and see how many people click. Play with the messaging on the landing page to see how many people actually register, and then see how many people attended and, click the link after the fact. So again, define the call to action, know exactly what you want. The other one is build quality assets or use quality assets to get the message out. So we've talked a lot about white papers and infographics and ebooks and all of that. You may not have the resources or the capacity to build those yourself. That's fine. Use your vendors. I guarantee you that you guys have a user ID and a password into the Microsoft portal, into the Cisco portal, into the, you name it. It is full of information that you can leverage. So an easy way to get some high quality assets out there is use somebody else's asset, based on their permission, of course. So send out an email saying, is managed security or is security a concern to you? Read this white paper by industry leading experts that talk about this issue. Click here. They click, they go to your form, they fill it out, you capture the information, you give them an asset. Then email them back a couple of days later. If you like this, you'll love that. So if you don't have the bandwidth to create these assets, use somebody else's. The key is to have enough content that you can constantly keep hitting these guys up with value. Again, it's got to be valuable. If it's not valuable, they're not going to use it. They're not going to click on it. And they're going to associate your emails, your campaign with useless information. So it's got to be good and it's got to be to the point. Again, ebooks, infographics, pre-recorded videos, webinars, live webinars, these are all incredibly inexpensive things to do. If you've got a webcam, you could create a short PowerPoint presentation with video where you can basically tell a compelling story to a very focused audience. Again, I said focused audience because you go back to my earlier slides, you got to know your audience and you got to know their triggers. A generic webinar on security is uninteresting to 90% of your customer, but a webinar on a case study that of one of your customers that experienced a failure but had a quick recovery because of the services they used, and this guy is local and you are pitching them to their association, will have a very high appeal. So I always say, if you want to go out and do a campaign, make sure that it is topical, that it addresses your audience, and it focuses on their trigger. The other thing I'll also say is there is no easier way to do a webinar and generate attendees if you actually include one of your customers on the call. So you can tell a great story about managed backup, managed AV, managed services, you name it. If you are pitching your dental practices, or you're pitching your lawyers, or you're pitching your doctors, have one of them on the webinar. Let them do the talking, because there is no easier way to sell than to have a reference customer do it for you. So if you're going to do a webinar, make it around backup and focus on one of your customers that is a colleague of everybody else you're inviting with a story that will appeal to them. Make it simple, and if you're short on content, book an hour webinar, have you and your customers talk for 20 minutes and open it up to questions. Because I guarantee you there is always more questions than you know what to do with it. And the questions are what everybody else is thinking. So it's always on their mind. So the last point that I wanted to talk about is practical marketing. So again, we've talked a lot about what we can do, the audience, metrics. The key is to start doing marketing and make it part of your business's DNA. So marketing is not one of those things where, March to June, we did lots of marketing because we hired a co-op student, so we were full on, but then after that, it all fell apart. Marketing is about just a core business practice. You do a little bit of it every day, and it will pay off in dividends. The fits and starts of marketing is a waste of money. Big activities that fall off the map is terrible because you spend lots of money and you're not going to get the ROI. What you want is to spoon feed your prospects. You want to spoon feed your customer a little bit of valuable information every month. So you want to get them to know that on this Wednesday, they're going to get an invitation from you on either a great quality asset, a webinar, a newsletter, anything, but it is predictable. You are going to see your database start to move when you do marketing on a consistent, predictable basis, because they will see you as a source of valuable information, somebody that they can rely on consistently, and more importantly, they're going to see you as an expert, because now they're going to associate you with great quality content, and you're the expert in their eyes. So when they are ready to make a decision, they will follow over to you. So practical marketing, social media. Everybody I talk to has the same experience. It's the social media roller coaster. So I don't know what happens, but one day they decide, I've been missing out on social media, I got to do it, and then it's off. They are going on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it. They're everywhere. They're posting their pictures of their dogs, stuff they're doing, webinars that are coming up, and then something happens, they get busy, and it just falls off the face of the earth. And you see it all the time. The thing with social media, again, is consistency. Don't try to be the social media guru to end all gurus. Just focus on doing a post in LinkedIn once a week. Could you do once a day? Sure. But start small, or do it every 2 weeks. But the key is to focus on the social media outlets where your target audience is hanging out. So whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it. But understand where they're going and make sure that you're there consistently. So the social media thing is a marathon, not a race. And it is something where they want to hear from you, but it's got to be valuable. So number one. Number two, list building. So I can't stress enough how important it is to have a healthy, strong database that you can market to. Everything that you're going to do is going to cost money in marketing. List building and database marketing is probably the cheapest of all. So hook up whatever CRM you're using with whatever email or marketing automation tool. So something like a MailChimp, for example, is a very cheap, cost-effective tool, but very powerful. And start building your database and constantly hitting it, making it warm. Because what you're really trying to do, and we call it a bit of the washing machine, but the key is to constantly have it moving. So constantly show value, send information. And again, it's got to be valuable. You're not just trying to hit them for the sake of hitting them. You want to show value because you don't know necessarily what is going to trigger them. Now, they may not be ready today, but they may be ready in 6 months. They may have just signed a 1-year contract with somebody else, but they want to keep their options open. All I know for sure is that I've never heard of a customer that has signed up with a vendor 20 years ago and is stuck with them. Everybody changes at some point. Everybody that you talk to is going to want to move. So list building is incredibly important. PR. Don't hire a PR firm until you are public or you have such a big market presence that you need to. Write a simple press release, have a customer that can quote, and go out and target those PR people. Again, there's probably only 5 or 6 people that are covering the space you're looking at. Chances are the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg isn't going to cover your press release, but there's probably 4 or 5 people in your space that want that information. Email them directly. The rest of it, search engine optimization, industry event, lunch and learns, webinar, these are all tools that you can use. The key that I always look at is how cost effectively can I do it? How many leads am I going to get? How much am I going to spend? And if it's below that $35, $30 to $50, I'm happy.
Well, thanks so much, Derek, for an excellent presentation. And yeah, there's been quite a few questions come in while you've been talking and been presenting. The first question is, how effective do you feel cold call prospecting would be in managed services sales?
Cold calling is a very effective means of reaching out to your prospects. Our thing is we will only cold call people that have done the lead activity with us. Picking up the yellow pages and calling is great, but I always say a sales resource is too valuable to just be doing random calls. So have the marketing engine drum up interest, send out a webinar and then cold call into everybody that attended or everybody that registered. And the call to action is, hey, you registered for a webinar but you didn't attend. Would you like the link? And oh, by the way, are you interested in talking with us? So cold calling out of the yellow pages I find, very difficult. I always say, let marketing do the heavy lifting at first, generate some interest, and have your salespeople calling them. Much more valuable.
Thanks, Derek. One of the other questions that we have here is, what are the suggested keywords that you would use when you're building your messaging?
Yeah, that I get asked that question all the time, and I'll tell you the easiest thing that I do is I look at my target audience's website. So I'll take a look at what are the keywords that my target audience is using when they are pitching their customers. So for example, if you are talking to lawyers and that is the market you want to go after, look at their site and look at what they're using. Specialists, experts, whatever those keywords are, that's what you want to use. Anybody that's done sales, and I'm sure everybody on the phone has, the easiest way to sell somebody is to repeat what they told you back to them in a way that makes them want to buy. So look at the keywords that are being used by your target audience and use those towards them. If they are pitching specialization, expertise, domain knowledge, that's what you use. I don't try to invent keywords, I just steal them from my customer sites.
Thanks, Derek. And would you recommend then keeping a spreadsheet or some type of documentation and then updating that on a regular basis?
That's a great question. Absolutely. And again, when I talked about messaging, the important part is to know the keywords you want to use for the segments. So if, for example, for the dentistry business, there are 5 or 6 keywords that you see on every site. Every time you talk to dentists, they're always saying it. Then you build a repository of the keywords to use so that when people write messaging, because you may not be writing the messaging yourself, but when people use the messaging, they are focusing on those words. And that is very important. And the problem is, it's never the words that you think that you want to use. You want to use words like cloud and expertise and certification and acronyms. What your customers are going to want is a whole new set of words, and those are the ones you need to standardize on.
Great. Another couple of questions are around marketing automation and marketing tools. There seems to be a lot of marketing automation tools and marketing systems that you can use online. Are there any in particular that you think would be really great for a small MSP or a small service provider to use that may not have a big budget to go and get a Salesforce or a Marketo style tool?
Yeah. The one thing I'll say is whatever tools you get, you're going to end up using maybe a third of the functionality. And it's not because you don't have the expertise or you don't have the desire, is that it doesn't matter what tool you use, you end up using a third of it. So just understand that from the beginning. The other thing, and we use this here at Enable, is look for tools that get you into the game without breaking the bank. I'm always worried about the tools that cost $5,000 or $10,000 a month and are going to do everything. Start small and grow from there. So with regards to tools, things like MailChimp, for example, great tool, easy to use, nice metrics, nice reporting. That is one that I would definitely recommend. Other things, and it really depends on, and I can, we can have a conversation offline, and anybody that's interested, but things like if forms, for example, are a concern to you, landing pages are a concern to you on your site with a form that feeds into your CRM, there are, landing page tools like Unbounce, for example, that will give you just a ton of flexibility to create beautiful landing pages with custom forms, but on the fly. When I look at tools, they've got to do a couple of things. One, they got to be cost effective. So, because I know for a fact, whatever tool I'm going to start with is not the tool I'm going to end up with. So I want it to be easy to get in, easy to get out, and I want the tool to be, that's going to show value. Number two, the tools have got to have reporting. I hate tools that don't show you metrics. So if, for example, your concern is, I'm using MailChimp, it does a great job on emails, but the links I can't track. Well, then use Bitly as a link shortener and capture that information. Make sure that MailChimp can tell you in an easy report how many emails were sent, how many were open, what the click-throughs were. From a landing page perspective, make sure that you can spin up pages easily, that it does integrate with the tools that you have. Tools change all the time. I ask every service provider I meet with, every entrepreneur I talk to, I ask them what tools they're using, and then I have my team go out and research them. And Tracy does that all the time. We are always looking for them. But when I respond to these questions by email, I'm going to send you sort of my list of the stuff that I really like to use.
Yeah, and we will also include that list when we send out the slide deck and the webinar recording later on this week. Well, that concludes today's webinar. I see that by the clock we are out of time. Thank you very much for your time, Derek.
Thank you.
And I hope that everybody online with us today enjoyed this webinar and found the information useful. And I would like to wish you all a very pleasant day.